Comic Book Savant, episode 302.
I know this. This I know. All that I have, all that is me, resides inside my poetry. And every time I write a rhyme, it might be the line that sets mine free. And also, I know that I don't...
Welcome to the Comic Book Savant podcast. I'm your host, James Harris. This week, I'm going to be doing a top 20 list of my all-time favorite comic book movie performances. I did a previous episode a while back with my top 10, so I just thought it would be fun to go back and revisit it because we've had so many comic book movies be released since the last time that I did the episode, that I thought it would be good to revisit it and expand it because there's been so many roles from villains to heroes to side characters that I really wanted to go back and touch base on updating that list. It only seemed fair with all the releases coming, and we are going to have more down the road. So this list probably will be revamped again in another couple of years, but I just thought it would be fun to update that. But before we get into that, as always, I would like to give a shout out to the sponsor for this in every episode, which is InStockTrades.com. It is the best place to go on the internet to get your collected editions, omnibus, absolute editions, masterworks, and so forth. They have some of the best prices around. Of course, you've heard this, before. You have savings from 35 to 42, up to 50% off on their deals of the week. This week, they have some really good and varied offerings for their deals of the week. We have Carnage Classic Trade Paperback, 50% off, only $17.49. They have DC The New Frontier Trade Paperback, which is a wonderful story by the late Darwin Cook that passed away not too long ago. They have that new edition of that trade paperback being released for $17.49 at 50% off. They have Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, the new series, the first trade, 50% off, only $8.99. We have Mythic Trade Paperback Volume 1, also only $8.49 at 50% off. Northlanders Trade Paperback Book 1, Volume 1, 50% off for $14.99. And then also one of my, back in my younger days, one of my favorite X-Men stories, or just fun X-Men stories, was X-Men Trade Paperback in Volume 2, Inferno. That trade paperback, 50% off, $17.49 as well. So they have a lot of great deals, excuse me, to check out. As well as always, if you're a U.S. customer, you can, any orders $50 or more, you get free shipping within the U.S. Again, that's if you're a U.S. customer. If you live outside of the U.S., you still can order. You still get the great savings, but you just don't get the free shipping. That's only for U.S. customers. So definitely stop by InStockTrades.com. Let them know what you heard of, excuse me, that you heard about them here first. And definitely go forth and support on that front. And then last but not least, I'd like to give a shout out to a very close friend of mine that one of actually the first listeners that I ever met, which is my friend Ed Moore. I met him at Comic Geek Speaks episode 100 celebration, or was it episode 200? I can't remember. It's been almost, that was like 11 plus years ago. But I got a chance to meet, it's been about 10 years ago because I was doing the show at that point. Ed approached me at the, Comic Geek Speak gathering that they were having. I was very new into podcasting at that point. I don't even think I had maybe 10 episodes out. I met Ed and his wife at the time. He recognized my voice. He approached me. I thought, and it was funny for me being so early in my podcasting career. I didn't think anybody was listening except for my friends. Excuse me. Don't know why my voice is going. And it was amazing to meet someone other than family or friends that actually listen to the podcast. We became quick, fast friends. We've maintained our friendship over the years. He, in turn, became from a supporter of different podcasts, including my own, to a podcaster in his own right. So I felt like I would use this time to give him a shout out and send you guys over to some of his podcasts that he does. He does the Mighty Thorcast, which you can find over at comicbooknoise.com/Thor. And he does a new Star Wars related podcast, which is around the new Marvel books and all the stuff going on with like with Rebels, all the new era Marvel, Disney / Star Wars stuff. And you can find that at bigtimenoise.com/Star Wars. But I'll have links in the show notes on the website and what have you. So you will have links directly to his shows. Give him a try. He's a really knowledgeable guy when it comes to comics, and he's a huge supporter of this show. So if you're interested in any one of those topics, you want to hear a podcast, definitely check those two shows out, and that's quality as always. So into the episode in the top 20 comic book movie performances. I'm going to start from 20 and then count it down to 1. Number 20 for me is Elizabeth Olsen. I really liked her, excuse me, I really liked her take on Wanda Maximoff and Scarlet the Witch. She really grew on me. I dug her in Avengers Age of Ultron, and I really liked the edge they gave her at the end, and I really liked her performance in losing her brother and that connection. Like, you saw her have a real path of her journey in the movies. As we saw the glimpse of her in Captain America Winter Soldier at the very end, then seeing her in Avengers Age of Ultron, and then even more so in Civil War. I really like the trajectory that they have her character going on, and I really like her as the character. I kind of didn't know much of her work. I think the only thing before her appearances in the Marvel movies that I knew of Elizabeth Olsen was from Godzilla that came out right before all of this, and I really didn't like that movie. I didn't really care for it in the movie, so it was a really turn for me where I got familiar with her through her doing this role, and I can't wait to see what they do with her character going forward, because I really, really enjoyed her in Captain America Civil War. It really made me hunker down and buy into her, her characterization of Scarlet Witch. Was a character that I've loved from, early in my days, in the early 80s, mid 80s, with her on the Avengers team and the West Coast Avengers, which I love that series, which she was a mainstay in. So it's cool seeing that character, and what I liked about that character being translated over to the big screen and it being done well. Number 19 for me would be Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson. We've had a fair amount of time to see him evolve as a character. And one thing that I did, I focused a lot on, when I picked this list of characters that performed, had more than one movie in that character. You have some one performance, that I'll get to later on in the count, that they played the character for one movie but did such a phenomenal job you couldn't help but have them on your list. But I also looked at characters with all these shared universe things now being such a real thing, and characters being played out through multiple movies by the same actor. I really considered some of those. So that's when you get to this 20, that you're seeing some of these characters that maybe were side characters, but I felt like that they were really well cast with these actors, and these actors really, even more so with Anthony Mackie playing Sam Wilson. I've read Cap books, but I didn't read early Cap stuff. Falcon was out of the comics for a while, and when they brought him back in, I didn't read stuff with him in it, so it was really my reintroduction and my interest in the character now has all stemmed from Anthony Mackie's portrayal of the character, in the movie. So it's cool that we've had him since Captain America: Winter Soldier, through Age of Ultron, his scene in Ant-Man, and Captain America: Civil War. I really like his character. I really like how he's evolved. I love how he's a good. He doesn't feel like a sidekick. He's his own man, but he has this great friendship and admiration for Captain America. So he's definitely more a partner than a sidekick, I always feel, in that situation. And he's going to ride or die, and I just love that. And he has that touch of humor, but he has that moral compass and code, and he's very much like Cap, that he's not afraid for standing for what he believes in, hence what we really saw in Civil War, and standing up for his convictions and willing to really fight for them. Number 18 for me is James McAvoy as Charles Xavier. I thought he really did an outstanding job in X-Men First Class, and also in Days of Future Past, how they blended. You got a chance to see James McAvoy's take on Charles Xavier, as well as Patrick Stewart's, and how seamless they were, and it really felt like the same person. He really shows some chops. I felt like they kind of shortchanged this character somewhat in X-Men Apocalypse, but I've already talked about the problems or issues that I had with X-Men Apocalypse when I reviewed it a few weeks ago. Where I don't think it had anything to do with his performance, more so the script, where they were juggling too much to really focus on him like they should have, and just his connection and his unwavering optimism when it came towards his relationship with Fassbender's Eric Lesher character, or Magneto character. He just really did such a good job, and I didn't think anyone could really follow up Patrick Stewart, because he was just that, iconic actor, that was perfectly cast as Professor Xavier. So when they cast out James McAvoy, I was like, I knew him from Wanted, but I was just like, is he him playing the, Xavier? And he so nailed it and did such a good job through this previous trilogy of X-Men First Class, Days of Future Past, and X-Men Apocalypse. He did a very good job, and I know from my understanding, I think that excuse me, not James McAvoy, Patrick Stewart's Xavier is going to be in that final Wolverine movie. But it'll be interesting to see, since they're moving forward with the franchises, and we know it's going to be another X-Men set in the 90s, that James McAvoy continues to carry on the role as Xavier going forward, because I've enjoyed him, and I hope they give him, a little bit more to do than what they did in X-Men Apocalypse going forward. Number 17 on my list would have to be Terrence Stamp as General Zod in Superman 2. I don't know. He's just like Neil before Zod. Every time I think about that, this movie was so important in my childhood, in my early development in comics in the 80s. I never really cared for the original Superman movie, but Superman 2 was like the de facto, superhero movie, till of course later on with Blade and, X-Men and all those things came out like in the 90s, in the late 90s going into the 2000s. Like Superman 2 for me was the de facto superhero movie up until that point. And Terrence Stamp did just such a great job in his complete arrogance and regalness as a villain, and he was just so well spoken but so dominant, and he just popped on screen. His smugness just popped on screen, and that's what you want from a villain, and it always just resonated with me, and I just always loved it. So I had to include him on the list for that performance, because I just love it. He's probably like my favorite part in that whole movie. Number 16 for me would have to be, it's a joint pick, because they're essentially the same character and the same take on the character, and that would have to be Christopher Reeve and Brandon Routh for being Superman, because essentially Brandon Routh was in a pseudo continuation of the original Superman 1 and 2 and Superman Returns, and he pretty much, continues the Christopher Reeve take on the Clark Kent Superman character. So I had to include them both, and I loved his homage to it. It felt natural and it felt like a fit. The story was a little bit wonky, but again, it was Bryan Singer's homage to the Richard Donner Superman movies, and I've always talked about this. If you've ever watched the Donner cut of Superman 1 and 2, you knew this was the natural succession of him paying honor because Bryan Singer worked for Richard Donner. He was like a assistant to him, working on these movies, so they were near and dear to him. And his Superman Returns was not a separate movie like some people think. It was actually a continuation of Donner's Superman story and his interpretation, continuing the story. So you can't have one without the other, because so many people complain about Brandon Routh being a knockoff of Christopher Reeve. He was the Christopher Reeve Superman. It was the sequel. Number 15 is Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye. I'm a huge Hawkeye Clint Barton fan, and I really thought about this. And he was underutilized in Avengers, and he was kind of the scapegoat. And I really hated that. I really liked his brief appearance in Thor, where they kind of we saw Clint Barton, not a.k.a. Hawkeye, but you first got introduced to him. He had that brief cameo in Thor. Then Avengers, I thought, he was, kind of misused. I liked his redemption in Avengers Age of Ultron. I still don't know the one thing about his character, and again, this has nothing to do with him. It was just how it was written about him being married with the family, because, from the comics, though he has been married, he's always been more of that playboy type, similar to Daredevil, or if you want to go DC, with Nightwing. They've had their share of women in the superhero community, and he's kind of been that heartbreaker and ladies' man. So it was a different take on him being, this normal guy with a family, married with a family, and he's a committed family man. Thought that was interesting. I thought Jeremy could have played it as a ladies' man too, but I do like that he's more a more senior member and plays more of a mentor. And I love his dynamic to his relationship with Elizabeth Olsen's Wanda character. That he's really the one that helps her come of age, and he's being that mentor character to her. I really dig that as well, because they have great chemistry as a older brother to younger sister type dynamic to their relationship, and how it plays off on screen. And I really liked that they evened him out. They didn't do too little in Avengers and then too much with Avengers Age of Ultron. They leveled off his character in Civil War, and I'm interested to see where they take him now, coming out of Civil War. And they were kind of war criminals, criminals of war. Like, is he going to be on the run? Can he not return to his family now because of the choices he made? So I'm very interested in his character thread going forward, due to the fact he's the only real member of the Avengers that had a family and had a normal life outside of being a superhero. I'm really looking forward to that. And number 14 for me is Sebastian Stan as the Winter Soldier, a.k.a. Bucky Barnes. And it was amazing, because I think sometimes we forget, just how much we've been exposed to certain characters. So I'm going back looking at it as Sebastian Stan has been in as many, if not more, movies than more of some of the other characters. We've been with him through Captain America, the First Avenger, Captain America, Winter Soldier, and Civil War. It wasn't like cameos. He was a substantial character in all three movies. So we've had a lot of screen time to see his character go through an arc, and I think he's a very fascinating actor in that role, and I really, enjoy him. I've heard people balk at his of his importance in Civil War, but it was really, the when you really break it down and you look at the Captain America movies, all three movies center around the friendship that he has with Steve Rogers and their close bond, and how they both were brought through time. One, how he was altered and used as a weapon, and then coming to somewhat redeem himself, or going on a path where we're at now, where Civil War ends. He's kind of trying to take the high road and the path to kind of redeem himself from being used as a weapon for all those years. And I just think he's a fascinating actor, and he so nailed the Winter Soldier character. At the same time, you have those flashes where those moments I love the most between him and Steve, like when they're landing towards the end of Civil War and they're going to Antarctica Siberia to fight Zemo in the research facility, or where he was housed in the Winter Soldier program. That they were talking about the girls that they dated and all that stuff, and they have those quiet moments between them, and they have those conversations. This just shows their great chemistry and friendship. It's just captured so well, and he has that great chemistry with Chris Evans. Number 13 for me is Alfred Molina as Dr. Otto Octavius in Spider-Man 2. I just thought Alfred Molina did a great job in playing Dr. Ock, and making him a sympathetic character, even though he's very much a villain in that movie. But he makes you believe and sympathize with him in his pain that he goes through. He just sells it, and I think even more so. Like I said, to me, the definitive cut of the movie is the 2.5 version that they did. I had the Blu-ray box set when it first was released, and they had the 2.5 version. I don't know how readily available you can find it now if you were looking for it, but it was a slightly extended cut. Mainly what was in that cut was a longer subway fight sequence between him and Spider-Man, and a few more sections of backstory that really just solidified Molina's performance. But even with the original theatrical cut of the movie, you still get his performance, and I still think he's just as big and as an important of a character in that movie just as much as Spider-Man is. And I think it was a true example of a villain being done right, where you can understand he's a villain, but you can also sympathize with the things that happened to him that sent him down that path of destruction. So definitely that's my number 13. For me, number 12 would have to be Haley Atwell. I just love her. That's the only thing I just love her as Peggy Carter. And I think she's probably even more so than Sam Jackson. She's probably portrayed her character, and she's crossed over mediums, because we've had her in Captain America: The First Avenger. We had her in the Marvel one-shot for Agent Carter, which was basically the pilot for that show, essentially. She's played in episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where they had a few flashback episodes. We've had her briefly in that one scene in Captain America: Winter Soldier. And then we had her in the flashback scene in Avengers: Age of Ultron. We've had her at the small cameo at the beginning of Ant-Man. Then we had 2 full seasons, which was 20 plus episodes or 20 episodes of Agent Carter. So we've really been exposed to her in that role for quite a while now, and she personifies just that character and that fun sternness. Just she brings so much energy to that role, at the same time being sexy, smart, intelligent, and just total BA. Just being that badass chick, you know, that you would want a female hero to be. Like, she's every equivalent to any man, be it Steve Rogers or anyone, Ant-Man, anybody she was around. You always knew she was not the damsel in distress. She could always hold her own and maybe save a man or two along the way. And I just always loved that about the character. I'm super sad that Agent Carter got canceled after the second season. But Haley came to, a few conventions that she was at, and that she would love to see it live on in maybe in another venue, maybe like a Netflix or something like that. And I hope they can get around to doing that, because I really enjoyed it, and I felt like it was definitely. I enjoyed season 2 just as much. I thought maybe season 2 was maybe a little bit better than season 1, because the scope of the show got broader. And hopefully we finally, at some point, get the season 3 of Agent Carter. I would love to maybe see it on Netflix more so than network television again, because it felt like it was shoehorned in, and it hurt its viewership potentially by where they would fit it in, kind of when S.H.I.E.L.D. would go on a break, then they would kind of come and overlap. I just think it probably would do a ton better on Netflix, because it has got a good word of mouth, and we know Marvel has that connection and that deal. Disney has a huge deal with the Marvel properties and whatnot on Netflix. That probably would be the greatest place for that to go and do very well, would be there, I believe. Number 11 for me is going to be Carl Urban as Judge Dredd, as portrayed in the Dredd movie that came out a few years back, that totally tanked at the box office, but was the perfect Judge Dredd movie. You know, we had that horrible one that Sylvester Stallone did, years and years ago, but they really redeemed the franchise. And I mean, I love the fact that Carl never broke the real premise of the character. He never took the helmet off. He stayed in the uniform and in the helmet. You never see his voice outside of his mouth through that, how the Judge Dredd mask is. And he just stayed in character. And the movie was done perfectly to accentuate the strong characteristics and the things that made Judge Dredd a cool character. He so nailed it. I would love to see them do a sequel to this movie eventually. It just didn't perform at the box office. It doesn't mean it was a bad movie. It was actually a fairly good, hardcore comic book adaptation. And maybe that's what hurt it. It was so dead on to the comics and the character, and it's an ultra violent character. But they made it work, and it was, like I said, if you have never seen Dredd, definitely check that movie out. Definitely underrated comic book movie gem right there. Number 10 for me is going to be Michael Fassbender as Eric Leshner and Magneto. Again, we've had him from First Class, The Days of Future Past, to X-Men Apocalypse. He's a great actor, hands down. I think he was the perfect pick to balance out, to play that younger. I think the brilliance of the casting of when they decided to do X-Men First Class is that they picked two actors that were definitely younger analogs and similar in talent type actors to their older counterparts that we got familiar with the original X-Men trilogy. And he such nails it. He's not, I think more so in his storyline in X-Men Apocalypse, we finally see the thing that pushes him over to the edge and what molds him into the Magneto that we have in that first X-Men movie. But seeing his journey getting to that point and the subtleness where you could see that the dark underpinnings were there to this man does eventually turn into what we know him as when we are introduced to him in the beginning of the first X-Men movie. And they gave him a good enough arc, but I think he got lost somewhat. But his story arc was one of the strongest, the first half of X-Men Apocalypse, where you really see when he loses his family again, how that drives him over the edge and to become what we know him as later. And I think that was a cool character arc and really kind of like a James Bond vibe to him in the first movie in X-Men First Class, and then just being more of a straight, villain in Days of Future Past. Like he's had many layers and shades, and he's definitely the international man of mystery. So they made him a very intriguing and more realized three-dimensional character, I think, through Fassbender's portrayal of Magneto. At the same time, always keeping the underpinnings there of we know what he's going to become, and they always show flashes, of that in his performance, in his performances throughout the movies. They were very consistent. They were very consistent to the blueprint of that the original Ian McKellen had already set up. So I like that you always could tell that he acted keeping those things in mind and making sure that he, relayed those things in certain mannerisms or tonations in the way he spoke and things of that nature, that you could truly see that they were the one and the same character, just a younger version, which has to be hard to do when you already know someone's played that role and you're playing a younger version. So everything that you do is in the past, but it leads up to making up what we know this iconic character to be, and to do it well. He did it extremely well. Number 9 for me is Ryan Reynolds as Wade Wilson, not just in Deadpool, but also in X-Men Origins Wolverine. I don't hate this movie entirely. I thought this movie was a fairly good Wolverine movie until the debacle in the third act of the movie. I thought when they saw that Weapon X program, they're out in the field and they do that one mission, and the whole setup going to the mission, him with the katana swords and slicing the bullets in half in that one scene where they take down that drug lord was perfect Wade Wilson to the T. What they did at the end, that was deplorable, and it wasn't really him anyway at that point. So a whole bunch of CGI and a stuntman. But that one scene was that's why I knew that him being Deadpool would work. He proved it in that scene, that setup, and that one scene in that movie. So, which is my favorite whole section of that whole movie, is that going in for that mission and seeing all the different powers and how they interact and took this kingpin or this drug lord down or whatever was awesome. Number 8 for me is going to be Scarlett Johansson as Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow. She had a shaky start in Iron Man 2 after Joss Whedon got a hold of her in Avengers. He really set her up to show that it was more there than the surface appeal to her. Really got developed more when the Russo brothers got start pitting her, and then in the Winter Soldier. And then Whedon did a good job continuing what they did in Age of Ultron. And then she really was such a major character in Captain America Civil War. She's probably the third most important character in the movie, next to, maybe fourth, because you got to put in Winter Soldier in there. That she was really a pivotal piece in that story. And in this world, they announced at some point that they want to pursue doing a Black Widow standalone movie. I wish it would have already been on the slate, maybe for sometime later in this phase, but hopefully they get it on the board from when we start finding out what some of Phase 4 movies are. That a standalone Black Widow movie is included. It would have been nice to have it sooner than later. So when she had that break at the end of, when she's talking to the Senate and kind of walks out at the end of Winter Soldier, that she had, the movie would have covered that point in time, unless you do it later and you kind of flash back to that time and kind of cover that gap between movies, and maybe she got into an adventure on that during that time period that we were away from her. Or you spin her out in a different direction coming out of Civil War. But it remains to be seen where that character is going to be, next time we visit the Avengers, where they're all going to be. So we have some time before we see her character again. But I'm all on board on her playing, Natasha Romanoff in her own Black Widow movie. And I think I would enjoy the storyline when they introduced, it was in the 90s, I think J.G. Jones was the artist on it. It was I think it was still on the Marvel Knights when they first did it, where they introduced the new blonde-headed Black Widow, and they clashed, and they were going at, I can't remember what that storyline was called. It was done in, I think, a 4-issue miniseries, and I think they did a couple of them to boot. I would like that story because they've done a lot. They fleshed out in Agent Carter, especially, which we saw a glimpse of in the flashback sequence of Avengers Age of Ultron, that Agent Carter basically went across Dottie. If you're familiar with the show, Dottie was one of the first of the line that came through the Black Widow program, and they set it up in flashback episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that then carried over to Agent Carter in season 1 and 2. That she was actually fighting a product of the Black Widow program. So Natasha wasn't the first one; she was one in the long line. But we saw the birth of this program through S.H.I.E.L.D. and through Agent Carter, through flashback sequences on how they got. Well, I'm not going to spoil it, but if you check those episodes out, they're really, really good, and it gives some background information into the Black Widow program, which would be really cool to see that, she made herself a public target in the end of Captain America, Winter Soldier, and even she's more so in the front because she's one of the public faces of the Avengers. So maybe that the people that made her are not so happy, so they feel like now she's been too exposed and they have to take her out. So they send in the newest Black Widow to take her out. That would be a great setup or premise to do a standalone Black Widow movie, and that's the story that you could tell. Number 7 for me would have to be Chris Evans. He played Human Torch in those Fox Fantastic Four movies, but he really took a hold of this Captain America Steve Rogers role and just really made it his own. And really, he's the heart. If the epicenter or the brain behind the whole Marvel expanded movie universe is clearly Robert Downey Jr., but the heart and the soul of it has to be Steve Rogers with Chris Evans. Just have loved him, and I recently went back and watched all the Captain America movies, and before I saw Civil War, and it's just his getting the character and giving him everything he needs, and to be that Boy Scout, but not so Boy Scouty where it's kind of like you resent him. You just feel where he's coming from, and that he stands for something, and with every fiber of his being, even if, and you saw in Civil War especially, even if it goes against what public belief or consensus thinking is, he will stand against it, even if it essentially makes him be the villain in the piece. Because depending on what side you choose, it can look like he's the villain in Captain America Civil War, but he just was standing on his morals and what he believed in, and he just didn't want to go away. He saw the long game, and how in the moment, if they chose to sign side the Sokovia Protocols, how it could be used against them and turned against them down the road. And I really enjoyed his take on it. And I hope he's all in going forward, because I just really love him in that role. And he gets better and better, it seems, in every movie and every appearance, that his character just gets more and more stronger and gets more and more depth and layers to Captain America that just makes you just love the character in general. Number 6 for me is Tom Hiddleston as Loki. Just throughout the movies, and I think it's more subtle. I don't like his bombastic Loki persona. It's cool. I more so like Hiddleston for his subtleties in his performance with Loki. I love the part in the first movie when he finds out that he's not really Odin's son, when he has those emotional outbursts on being in Thor's shadow, and that, you know, he detests him for that fact that he always would have to contend with the shadow of the mighty Thor looming over him at all times. And I think in Thor Dark World, the one thing I could say about the Thor Dark World, I love seeing him work with Thor. I love the pain where when there was it Frigga dies, and he finds out that she's passed, and how it's a revenge tale, because though Loki was the villain that he was, he still loved his mother, and he loved Frigga, whatever. And I love that emotion. He can play that devilish, charmish, you know, god of mischief, and but at the same time he has the complexity and the nuance and the performance that he can convey those emotions at times, and that's what really sells me. And that he's not the mustache twirling villain all the time, that he does have depth to his character, and we've seen it, and he's portrayed it on screen, and you know, where he's felt slighted, and you can relate to him. If you've ever had an older sibling, or you know, or you felt like you were being neglected because of your other sibling, where some of that resentment, and that's his motivation. You know, those things are his motivation. He wants his own niche. He wants to cut out and be able to make a name for himself. He wants to rule. He wants to be in those positions, but he could never get it in Asgard without being a villain, because he would always have Thor in his way, because he's Odin's son. And he's not. Even though he was raised as him, he will always have that as something he would have to contend with. So that's my number 6. Number 5, of course, would have to be Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. I loved it. I remember when people were flipping out when he was first cast, and so many people had issues because Robert, you know, at the time, Robert Downey Jr. has had, you know, numerous encounters before that point, acting and with drinking and drugs and all that kind of stuff. So he wasn't the popular pick when they originally picked him in the role, but, you know, he had got his life together. Like, you know, we all have ups and downs. He recovered like bandits, and this is, you know, the Tony Stark persona is not so different from the Robert Downey Jr. persona. So he's really playing himself, and we've seen him portray Tony Stark not just in Iron Man. He had the cameo at the end of The Incredible Hulk. He was in Iron Man 2, Iron Man 3, The Avengers Age of Ultron, Captain America Civil War. He's really the thing that got this all off the ground and made it work, and continues to make it work. And I don't know what else I can say about it. We haven't already spoken about him. He's just that dude. So he's my number 5 choice. Number 4 for me would have to be Heath Ledger, his Joker in The Dark Knight. It's haunting. It's a haunting performance, and it stands out even more because it was his last performance, and he died shortly after, you know, he finished filming the movie. But I can go back and watch this movie. He just has that spine. It's one of the lifetime performances you see. He, you know, for so many years, they never thought they could really do justice to the Joker based on the original Batman movie with Jack Nicholson playing the role. And even though that's still, I went back and watched that movie not too long ago, and it's still phenomenal, and his performance is good. But he is a more darker, more today type in your face portrayal of the character, more a la shades of the Killing Joke in the current Joker that we had in the comic books, where Jax is more of a throwback to the, you know, maybe the 60s and 70s and early 80s, maybe, because it didn't get too dark. So I would say early, where Heath is like an amalgamation of the Joker that came I just said it. The Killing Joke, came from the Killing Joke on. He kind of was that amalgamation of the different shades and colors of the Joker, and it's just haunting when you go back, and he does it so well. And he just pops off of screen, like as a villain. He just pops, and he just makes you feel something you see him in that role, and he can frighten you, but then make you laugh at the same time. He can totally have that sense of horror that he's totally unhinged, especially every time he keeps retelling the story on how he gets the smile on his face. Just is shades from the killing, something he borrowed from the Killing Joke, but just how frightening he comes across each time he tells a story, and it keeps changing and changing. It kind of haunts you, and it stays with you throughout the movie, just how unstable this character is, but is at the same time a brilliant mind in what he's doing. He's just unhinged. He's not a healthy person. Number 3 for me would have to be Hugh Jackman. You know, we've had him as Wolverine through 3 kind of full franchises. We've had him in the original X-Men trilogy, the new X-Men trilogy, and then he's filming the last movie in his Wolverine trilogy. He's played this dude for almost 20 years now. He's played the character Wolverine. I don't know what else to say. He embodied Wolverine. Even though I always thought it was funny because Wolverine was a short guy. He's not in. Hugh Jackman's a very tall man. He always made that work. He just you ignored it, even though stature wise it was like, yeah, he's like twice the height as Wolverine. He always sold it from his mannerisms. He just nailed the character. He made you forget about the most glaring issue for anyone else. And I think it didn't prop back up until seeing him in the scene that I didn't think that was filmed well. I thought it was a cool scene, but it didn't come off the way it should have, maybe for me. And X-Men Apocalypse, when they had the Weapon X scene, you could really tell how tall he was, and that outfit that, even though in the comics it looked cool on Wolverine, it's made for smaller dudes. So just seeing it bounce and jiggle all around when he was running around, slashing and stuff, it just looked weird because he was so tall, and Wolverine's so not tall. So I don't think it was modified enough the way it should have looked on a taller man. It just wasn't constructed well, and it just looked like it was kind of laughable seeing it jiggle all around while he was, moving all around and killing people. It just was a little off for me. But he's really just has personified and embodied everything that makes Wolverine a cool character. He has done that throughout. So that's my number 3 pick. Number 2 for me would be Christian Bale. I still really enjoy his portrayal on Batman in the Nolan Batman movies. I think still hands down one of my favorite, comic book movies of all time is Batman Begins. And he was just a different Batman, more grounded and believable. I believed him as Batman as well as Bruce Wayne. Now, the whole yelling "I am Batman" thing, yeah, I could have did without that. I could have did without that. But it was all good. Like, barring the whole crazy Batman voice, just a really great actor, and he had the balance between the two. I think he was the best complete Batman. Now, I do really enjoy the Ben Affleck take that we just had of Batman, Bruce Wayne, and Batman v Superman. But we know we have more of him to see in the role, so he might eventually pop up on this list. But as of right now, still Christian Bale has to be my favorite Batman and Bruce Wayne to date. So he's my number 2. And number 1 for me is Michael Keaton as Batman. We had him in Batman and Batman Returns. I didn't like Batman Returns, and I've spoke on that before. But I loved Batman. It's a classic. They took Mr. Mom. They took the guy that played freaking Mr. Mom and had him as Batman. That was the most genius casting, and he did such a good job. And I dug his Bruce Wayne and Batman. It doesn't stand up. It was perfect for that point in time because comic book movies were such a new thing, especially doing something as dark as Batman at that time. I think Tim Burton did a great job in casting him and directing him. And it worked for that time, and it holds up. It can be hokey at parts now when you go back and watch it, but at the time it really worked, and it's a solid performance. I can't knock anything about Michael Keaton, and I think it was probably the most ballsiest move of casting an actor to play a certain character, and he took it and knocked it out of the park. Because people were like, it was the pre-internet age, and it was still an uproar everywhere about that casting when they announced Michael Keaton was playing Batman. but it worked, and it works. You can go back and watch that movie. It works. That's my top 20 list for right now. Again, this will be in flux. We will revisit this list again at another time. But I really thought this was fun. And comment. You can comment on the site in the show notes. You can, always email me either through the website, or you can just email me directly, comicbooksavant@gmail.com, or you can go to a website. It's a contact page there. You can email me directly from the website. The website, as always, is comicbooksavant.com. You can follow me on Twitter @comicbooksavant, also on Instagram @comicbooksavant, and I'm also on Snapchat. And I've done a few things. I'm trying to post more on Instagram, and I don't think I've done a Snapchat story yet, but I'll be doing something on Snapchat. I don't know if you get notified. I don't have a lot of followers on either, so follow me on social media. I'm looking to do more things on there. I think before last week's episode, I posted a little something talking about the show and where I was going. So I'm going to be doing things like that, or posing questions to you guys as listeners. So definitely follow me there, so so you can participate in the show, help me choose show ideas, help me come up with some of these lists, things of that nature. I want to make it as interactive as possible. So again, Snapchat, Comic Book Savant, Instagram, Comic Book Savant, Twitter, Comic Book Savant. Follow me on said social media outlets. That's all I have for you guys this week. And next week should be episode 303. Should be a Cutting the Stack, where I'll do some comic reviews for next week. So, and it'll be a pretty full episode. I'm reading a ton of books right now, trying to check out some of the Rebirth stuff. On top of, I'm trying to get caught up on some of the Star Wars stuff. So I'll be covering quite a few books next week. So that'll be coming then. I'll see you guys then. Again, check out my friend Ed Moore for the Mighty Thor cast, as well as Star Wars The New Era, the other podcast that he does. He does many more, but that was just two that I would name that I thought would pique some of you guys' interest. And again, I will see you back next week for another episode of Comic Book Savant. You guys take care. Bye.
And into lyrical wholeness. And I know this, and I know this. This I know, this I know.